All right, good morning to my AC3 class. Hope everything's going good for you guys. Today, as I promised, we are going to be beginning our new chapter. This new chapter is going to be Crime of the 1970s. Crime of the 1990s. You remember we already did Crime of the 70s when we talked about David Berkowitz and John Wayne Gacy and Ted Bundy and all that. And then we even had a chapter on the cults of the 70s with Charles Manson and Jim Jones and all that. So this chapter is going to be similar to that, but different. And you're going to see whenever we start learning about it, whenever I start teaching about it. The chapter is going to consist of three different people, or three different groups, if you will. Group number one is the Weaver family, which is who we're going to go over today. Group number two is the Branch Davidians, led by David Koresh. And finally, group number three, which kind of ties it all together, is really not so much a group as much as a man. His name is Timothy McVeigh. And what you're going to see is these three groups, these three stories, all tie in together. Ruby Ridge leads to the Branch Davidians. The Branch Davidians leads to Timothy McVeigh. So it's kind of like a domino effect as far as how that goes. Now, if you go into your team's page under files, there's going to be a folder that's going to say either crime or cults of the 90s. I'm not sure which one. And then if you look at that, there's going to be a PowerPoint presentation. So if you guys can click onto that, we're going to go over the first part of it together. So if you want to pause me real quick, open up that file, and then we can go over slide by slide together. Okay? All right, now, assuming you pause me and you're ready to go, open up that PowerPoint. I have it on my phone, so I'm going to go over the first part of it with you today. Today's just Ruby Ridge. Slide number one is just a blank slide, so skip that. Slide number two, it says 5 new facts about childhood, 15 new facts. Don't worry about that. That was for a project we were going to do if we were actually in school. Since we're not going to worry about that. But go to slide number 3 where it says Ruby Ridge. All right, that's where we're going to get started. So Ruby Ridge it's a little mountain in Idaho where a guy sets up. When you think about like doomsday preppers and people that just want to be left on their own in the woods, in the wilderness, that's where these people come into. So Ruby Ridge, when we look at that, we're looking at the Weaver family. So you have the patriarch, the leader, which is Randy. He's the father, head of the family. His wife, Vicky. Vicky was a little interesting. She would always have visions of the apocalypse and how the world was going to end and all those good things. Lovely lady. You had their son Samuel and their daughter Sarah. They also had a dog. But we're going to get into why they're living in the mountains in Idaho, but they are. There's no electricity. There's nothing like that. All right. They're living like wilderness people, like Davy Crockett and all those sorts of things. And we'll find out why here in a second. Okay, to the slide where it says distrust in the government. Randy had a strong distrust in the government, and he felt that the world was corrupt. He felt that there was no good politician. It wasn't like he was a Democrat. It wasn't like he was a Republican. He hated all of them. All right, he felt that they were untrustworthy, that they were corrupt, they were terrible people. So he decides, along with his family, to live on their own without modern technology. He says, we want to be able to live our own way of life. We want to be able to do things our way. We don't need the government taking care of us. We're not going to pay taxes. But we also don't want their help either. We don't need Social Security. We don't need unemployment. We don't need welfare. We don't need any of those things. We're going to live on our own in the woods. Okay? So he moves to a 20-acre piece of land in Idaho known as Ruby Ridge. All right. Why it's called that, I don't know, but it is. In 1985, the FBI, remember, Randy hates the government and he's a little nutty, I guess you could say. But the FBI begins investigating him because there are claims that Randy is threatening to kill President Reagan and the Pope. Now, President Reagan, he hates the government, so him making threats against the president's life probably isn't that ridiculous since he really distrusts the government. As far as the Pope goes, I don't know, but apparently he made some threats on the Pope's life as well. All right, go to the next slide. So the investigation turns up that Weaver was a member of the Aryan Nations, and he had a large stockpile of weapons. The Aryan Nations is essentially modern day Nazis, if you will. So Randy's not a good guy, all right? But the one thing you need to keep in mind during this section is it's not illegal, all right? It's a little shady, it's a little messed up, but it's not illegal to be a member of those groups. Now, as far as the weapons goes, that's where you fall into some legality issues, okay? So in 1989, Randy sells one of his guns to a guy, and that gun is used in a bank robbery. Randy wasn't involved in the robbery. Randy didn't do the robbery, but the gun that he sold was the gun that was used in the bank robbery. So he's indicted for that, and he's ordered to appear in court February 7th, 1991. Randy tells him, he goes, look, I'm not going, all right? My bad that it was used in a robbery. I didn't mean for that to happen, but I am not going. I am not taking part in this court case. Because remember, he doesn't consider himself necessarily like an American, if you will. He really considers himself just on his own, doing his own thing. Fast forward a little bit, August 1992, federal marshals arrive to arrest Randy Weaver. This is where the problems begin, all right? The marshals show up and they're locked and loaded because they know he has a lot of weapons. They think he's a little bit crazy, so they don't want to mess around. The Weaver house also had a lot of dogs, all right? And the marshals didn't just want to go knock on this guy's door because they're like, we walk up to his door, he's going to shoot us. So they want to try to figure out what's going on. They're trying to get a scope for the land. So they start throwing rocks at the Weaver cabin to see where the dogs are, to see how the dogs react, okay? As this happens, and once again, you're going to get different sides of the story here based on if you're the marshals and the government or if you're the Weaver family. Some of the dogs start running into the woods. And the son, Samuel, chases the dogs into the woods because he doesn't want the dogs to get killed by the marshals. A gunfight ensues, and it lasts for a little while, and a marshal is killed, and so is the dog and the son, Samuel. Now, this is where, and even today, we really don't know who did it. Who started the gunfight? Was it Samuel and the Weavers? Was it the marshals? We don't know. The only thing we do know is Samuel's dead, the dog's dead, and a marshal is dead. The marshals, next slide. The marshals allow Randy and his family to retrieve Samuel. So they get Samuel, they take him back to the cabin. The next day, the marshals are then told, because they're told that, the Weavers are a dangerous group. They are told, as you're scoping the land, if you see anyone with a gun, you shoot them and you kill them. Well, here's the deal. The Weavers always had guns because that's how they would kill their food. All right, they would hunt all the time. They would plant vegetables, they would do those sorts of things, but they also had to hunt for their meat. And obviously they would be on patrol as well with what was going on. So the marshals are told, shoot and kill anyone with a gun. Well, Vicky, the mother, and you can find this on some YouTube clips, is outside, and she has a gun. She has a shotgun, I believe. And she's just standing there. Well, the marshals see that she has a gun, and a sniper shoots her right in the head and shoots her with an exploding bullet, and her head explodes. And now we have an issue. Now this begins a standoff, and this will be where the next slide comes in, where it says 12-day standoff begins. This garners national attention, national news every single day. And what happens is the marshals and the government are kind of caught off guard because they think the American people are going to side with them, right? Randy broke the law, can't do what he did. You can't be hoarding guns. You can't be selling guns to people without the proper means. And you can't just live in the woods without paying taxes or any of those sorts of things. But what really surprised the marshals is a lot of American people started siding with Randy and the Weavers. Now, if you sided with the Weavers, you had your reasons, okay? So think about it. What would your reasons be for siding with Randy and his family? Well, they felt that the government was exerting too much power. that the government was trying to butt into these people's lives when all these people were trying to do was mind their own business, and that the Weavers only wanted to be left alone. All right, they're living by themselves in the woods. Yeah, they're maybe a little kooky. That's a little weird, but they're not bothering anybody. And all told, they're really not. The gun thing, yes, obviously that's a big deal, but there's a lot of evidence that shows that Randy didn't know that that was going to happen. So the people that are siding are saying these people want to be left alone. They're not bothering anyone. They're living by themselves in the woods. Just let them do them. All right. And you started killing members of their own family. You killed their son. You killed their wife who was doing nothing. So yeah, shame on you. We're going to side with the Weavers. Now, just because a lot of people sided with the Weavers does not mean that other Americans didn't side with the government. They did. And if they sided with the government, it was simple. Hey, the Weavers broke the law. If I have to follow the law, if you have to follow the law, then guess what? So do the Weavers. Just because they want to live by themselves and be mountain families in the woods doesn't mean they can't follow the laws of this land. They didn't, so they need to pay the consequences. And you can't just live in a lawless society, right? We have laws for a reason. And they need to follow those. So you would fall into two separate camps. You would be the pro-Weaver side, or you'd be the pro-government side, all right? And keep in mind, and this is going to be relevant later, a lot of Americans would show up at Ruby Ridge, like on the outskirts where the road is, supporting the Weavers with signs, showing support, bashing the government, all those sorts of things. And one of the people that shows up is a young man named Timothy McVeigh, and we're going to get into him later this week. All right, next slide. Standoff ends. There's a guy, and if you look him up, if you Google him and you see a picture of him, he looks exactly like you would think he would look based on his name. This man's name is Bo Gritz. What a name. All right. Bo Gritz is a civilian negotiator. They call him in to try to end this standoff, right? Randy agrees to speak with him because Bo Gritz is a patriot, if you will, and he understands Randy's plight. So Randy agrees to speak with him. Bo goes into the cabin and they talk. However he did this, I don't know, but Bo Gritz gets Randy to surrender. So Randy surrenders to the authorities. You would think that he's going to spend a lot of time in jail, right? But the government kind of didn't look so great in this, all right, as far as killing the son. And once again, we don't know who started it. It's very plausible that the Weavers fired the first shots. Killed the wife, all those sorts of things. So Randy gets acquitted of all charges, meaning he is found not guilty, all right? The only thing he is fined for or found guilty of is failing to appear in court. Remember back in 91 when he had to appear in court, he says, I'm not going. It's the only thing he's found guilty for. Him and the surviving members of his family, which is his daughter, they sue the federal government. And believe it or not, they win. And they are awarded $3.1 million. Okay? So the government, in a weird way, is kind of, I don't want to say admitting what they did was wrong, but, you're giving them $3.1 million. So, you can make your own decision as to why they would do that. Randy is still alive today, and so is his daughter. The daughter, if you go on YouTube, there was a documentary made about Ruby Ridge not too long ago. If you want to check it out, it's pretty wild. I know just me talking about it and the PowerPoint, you're like, I don't know. Watch the documentary on Ruby Ridge. It is absolutely fascinating. But the daughter talks about it. Randy, still alive, but kind of keeps to himself. Doesn't do interviews, doesn't do any of those sorts of things. But what this does, and the reason Ruby Ridge is important, is it leads to a strong growing distrust in our government. And that is what ends up leading to what we're going to talk about tomorrow, which is the Branch Davidians and David Koresh. And this happens in Waco, Texas. And if you think that what you just learned today about Ruby Ridge is bad, wait until we start talking tomorrow about Waco, Texas. Okay? All right, that's it for the lesson today on Ruby Ridge. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Hope you guys understand it a little bit. If you have any questions, please shoot me a text on Teams. I'll get back to you. I'll answer it as best to my ability. But also do some more research on Ruby Ridge as well. Google it. Check out Google Images to where you can see what Ruby Ridge looked like, the landscape, those sorts of things. Also, YouTube. If you have Netflix, there's a documentary on there called Ruby Ridge. Check it out. It's fascinating, and you guys will really like it, all right? Keep looking at these notes. and keep looking at my YouTube videos to help get some background on these notes to understand what's going on. And I will be back tomorrow. We're going to talk about Waco, Texas. All right. You guys have a good day. See you then. Bye.